Okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm really excited about tonight's conversation. Pam Mertz, I've been a member of the NSA for, I was just counting it today, 18 years, and that's really exciting. So tonight we're going to be having a conversation about the words that we use or the language that we use to talk about and describe stuttering. I have two very esteemed colleagues with me tonight who are going to help manage this great conversation. So, as Ezra, I'll point to you first. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ezra. I'm the person who stutters, obviously. I've been part of the NSA for this year. Pam, it's actually going to be 10 years since I went to my first regional conference,
Oh my
which means 10
goodness.
years since I think I met both you and Mike. I don't there, so pretty wild. And I work in HR. I live in Portland, Oregon. I have two ca cats who may or may not be disruptive during this. And I run an account on Instagram and a podcast called Stutterology, and I'm really excited about the topic tonight because it's something that I talk about a lot on that account.
Thank you, as Ezra and Mike.
My name is Michael Molino, and I've been a member of the NSA for longer than I probably wish to say. Actually, since 1987, 86, actually.
Wow.
And
Longer than I've been alive.
right, I think I just got out of high school. Yeah, and been all over the US. Anyway, I don't know what to explain anymore or tell about myself. I guess I could tell you I'm a speech language pathologist. I served in the Navy for 24 years before that. I am a person who stutters. Yeah, that's it for now. Sorry.
Okay, wonderful. I'm gonna go ahead and get the conversation started, but I do just want to give a shout out. I recognize a couple of people that were at our first edition of this, like a year and a half ago. So it's so nice to see faces that have come 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 back to roost with this topic. So we're gonna just go ahead and put it right out there. What words do we use to describe stuttering and our stuttering? If anybody would like to jump in and share, like, what words do we use? Adam, are you raising your hand?
I hate it. I hate it. Hell on earth, Pam. Hell on earth for me. Every single day, it's a nightmare. Every day is hell on earth, and oh God, yeah, it's hell. I've done, I've done therapy after therapy after therapy. You know what? It's all, uh, it's all relapses, and I'm just, I've had it up to here. I have had it up to here every day. It's a nightmare, Pam. Gang, it is not good for me. Oh, I hate it with every whatever, whatever you want to call it. I hate it every single day. It is hell on earth, and I've lived and what I've lived with it for at least for 43 years at least. It's been up and down. I mean, but it it gets on my nerves every single day, and I don't know how I'm still alive.
Adam, well, part of the reason is
I'm
that
done.
you attend these types of sessions
I
and
do.
and you have interactions with others who stutter. So we're glad that you're with us
Bingo.
tonight. And
Thank you.
yes, thank you for sharing. Arnetta, nice to see you here
Okay.
tonight.
My name is Arnetta Jones. I live in Concord, California. I've been involved with the NSA. I joined in the 80s when it was primarily based in San Francisco. So it's interesting to hear what Adam has to say, because I can definitely relate to that too. Although I think age helps. It's something about getting older that I feel has helped me. But stuttering for me has totally been a journey, and it wasn't until I almost got into my 50s. Well, okay, wait. It was in my 30s that I discovered the NSA. And, through that whole process, support groups, this, that, all of that kind of thing, it wasn't until I was in my 50s that I finally said, I am done with this total anxiety and fear of stuttering. I finally had to have a lot of self-talk with myself and figure out that the only thing that's going to get me through this is acceptance. And that's how I look at my stuttering today, just accepting what it is and moving on. And truly, that has not been easy. And it does not happen overnight. I feel a real sense of fluency at this stage in my life, but that's only because I have finally given up the ghost and become very comfortable with it. But when people, I've sat in Bible study and they've talked about fear and this kind of thing. I have said, I have looked fear in the face. I know what fear is. That whole fear of just, well, back in the day, making a phone call. I mean, I could really make myself sick. And I mean it, sick with fear of stuttering. But I had a conversation yesterday sitting at the table with some ladies who I quilt with. And this one lady talking about her husband stuttered. And I'm thinking, what? I don't believe you. I mean, I have sat here at this table these last several years and you never said a word about it. What is that? And she really didn't think anything. She wasn't, there was nothing about her husband stuttering that fazed her. That just was something he did. And I remember someone saying to our support group one time, I think that people who stutter make a lot more about their stuttering than they need to, because a lot, when we're talking to people and we're stuttering, talking to them, and we're all worried, and this word avoidance and trying to not to stutter, and I don't know. Yeah, I guess there are rude people, but if for the most part, if they're your friends, your family, they're not going. They just are listening to you talk. So, but I always say in other stuttering connections and what have you, this NSA Connects is the best thing the NSA has ever come up with. Not being thankful for COVID, but these connects are great. So thank you.
And Arnetta, before I shift it over to Mike and Ezra, have you always called stuttering, or have you ever used other words to describe it?
No, well, there was no other word to describe it. And truly, I can stutter on stuttering. And so by the time I get done with getting that word out, I say, yeah, what is that? What I just did. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Not seeing any other hands raised yet. So Ezra, Mike, do you
Yeah.
want to?
And I also want to say if anyone wants to like put words in the chat, so I'm going to read some of the things that people have said, and also I'm going to throw in some of the other words that we talk about when we say stuttering. So some people will say problem, disorder, affliction, impediment, defect. Other words like difference, neurodivergence, uh, uh, treatment, disability, abnormal, disfluency. Some of the ones that have been said were nightmare, journey, total anxiety, and fear of stuttering. And I want to point out that instead of just saying anxiety, saying that fear of stuttering, feeling a sense of fluency, becoming comfortable, sick, just something he did. So if people have words of like, I used to call my stutter a fluency disorder because that was the like clinical term, right? Now I just kind of call it a stutter. Sometimes I'll say speech disability. So if anyone wants to throw in the chat too, or they can raise their hand there, like a word or phrase, even if all you want to share is just the word or phrase that you use, go for it. But yeah.
So has anybody referred to stuttering as an impediment?
See some heads nodding. I see some heads nodding. If you want to share that, was it when you were younger, or is that a word you picked up as you aged? When was that? And
I think a lot of these terms were placed upon us clinically when we were going through our journeys here, by speech pathologists or the internet or other clinical folks, and any kind of abnormality. I mean, you could call it that too. From the norm. Anything out of the norm is, tends to have a negative connotation to it, right?
yeah. But then as we grow older, as we all age, we all know, what is the norm? Like, is there a norm? Everyone has something, right? You have a disability, we have disorder, we do this, we do that. So is there really a norm? No, I don't think so. But I would like to think I'm the norm, but I'm not. I'm far from it.
Yeah. I feel like we people just, everybody likes to label things and put things in bins and boxes because it's easier that way to categorize something and then not to think about it. And one of the cool things about categorizing things is we have the luxury of calling it whatever we want, whatever suits us best and supports us best, right?
Yeah.
Andy, I love that you pointed out that these were words oftentimes given to us by speech therapists, by other people. I think that's a really important thing to point out, and that, at some point people hopefully can decide or not to use words that they pick based on their experiences too. So I just really wanted to I'm really glad you brought that up.
iPhone number 2, there's no name associated with it, but you have your hand raised.
Is it John Gamble? I'm John Gamble. I've been trying to get on, but I can't find the right button. Can you folks hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't see me, but that's no huge.
Yeah, we can see you.
I have a certain huge.
Yeah, we can see you.
I have a certain advantage over all of you, and that I've been stuttering for 76 years, and that's double, I suspect, what any of you have. It's a long journey, and I could talk for an hour about it, but I've seen a lot of changes. I've learned to accept it better and work with it, but it's had a huge impact on so many parts of my life. I remember first grade, before any of you was born. I got through first grade with a grade of D because they thought I couldn't read. It's that I couldn't talk and say the words on the printed page. By third grade, I was talking the most in class of anyone, and that went on through a lot of my life. I don't, how long do you want me to go about this journey? I don't want to bore you with my journey. Can you folks hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. But there are just a few things I'd like to touch on. I started college in '63, and I wanted to go to med school. I took a chemistry course the first semester. That's what you have to do for medical school. And we got the first test back, and I got, I think, a 96 or a 97. And the procedure the professor used was to go around the room in random. And he'd call on people. And the third person he called on was me. I froze and couldn't say a word, so he kind of made fun of me for not knowing he didn't know I didn't tell him that I stuttered. So what did I do in my wisdom as an 18-year-old? I dropped the chemistry course. I decided I wouldn't go to medical school. I followed a whole different career path, and that's because of one thing. I was a college professor for close to 50 years. I just retired a few years ago. The stuttering got in the way with being the best professor I could be for probably 25 years. But I became, I think I'd say, a lot better. I'd talk about it. It was hard for me to say on the first day of class, look, there's something we have to deal with together. I stutter. It will have some impact on the class occasionally. But once I said that, and I was probably 45 years old when I said that, it just made the classes go much, much better. The proudest moment in my life, I guess, as a professor, I won the best professor award for Penn State. And that's a huge, 70,000 students. And that was both because of my stuttering and, in general, it was more because of my stuttering than not because of my stuttering. So now, I'm sorry, I'll shut up in a minute, but the worry that I had the most with my stuttering, I knew my father, of course, who stuttered as a very young kid, and they clipped his tongue. They went in and they cut a little bit of the underside of the tongue. And my father claimed that cured his stuttering. I think what it did was very new behavior, and they told him that it would cure his stuttering, and it hurt like hell when he tried to talk for a few weeks. And so he just went on without stuttering. I've stuttered, as I've said, since I was 2 years old or 3. Still do. I have it under pretty good control a lot of the time. I went through something I don't know whether any of you are old enough to have gone through. I worried like hell that my son would stutter. He does not. He just turned 39. and he will know you won't start stuttering at 39. I worried with my grandsons who are age 4 and 7. There was some disfluency, but I think the odds are that they will not stutter. So that's my story. I'm sorry I talked so long.
Let me ask everyone real quick, because I know we're going to get off topic, but I just want to, in the audience, how many SLPs are there? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, myself, and then maybe some of the ones with no pictures. Okay. Because
One more.
okay,
So-
one more, Amy. There might be another one. Okay. So we have a handful. And I'm great that you're all here. But as we all know, there's we could probably have a discussion on all of the myths, all the things we could do to fix a stutter. We could, just like in the King's speech, I have a mouthful of marbles, and that's supposed to be able to help. Yeah, I have this, I have that. And clipping the frenulum, which is called a frenectomy, is virtually nothing to do with stuttering at all. It's mainly there for, like, if you can eat properly, if you're not able to do this. But more importantly, in my work with adolescents, it's a huge impact on speech sound disorders. We have R's and TH's and T's and some other stuff that's just, it's necessary. Some people don't do it, but when it's really tight, that's what it's for. Just, you can go ahead and do that, and it opens up the world. Now, it doesn't open it up for everyone, but it opens up for the majority. So I don't want to get off on these whole, all these other different things, because we could sit here all day long about all kinds of other stuff. But I just wanted to bring that up. I know back when Pam had said something to, what words do we use to describe? I remember hearing speech impediment years ago when I was younger, and it was because that's what the doctor said. I have a speech impediment. And then he said, I stutter. So that fell under the overall umbrella of speech impediment. And then I didn't use the word impediment, but definitely identify with the word stutter, although I have met people over the years and they use the word speech impediment to identify with instead of using the word stutter. And I've asked some of them, and the reason why they do, it's easier to say speech impediment than it is to openly say the word stutter. Yeah, because of the S and TT, stutter. You're probably gonna get stuck on that 9 out of 10 times. So that's why they would use the word speech impediment. Are there any words like that that you would use instead of saying the word stutter?
Right. And one other thing I want to add to that too is that when we're using the words we pick, I think it's interesting that people do it as like a word swap thing. And also currently ASHA, so the American Speech and Hearing Language Association, where a lot of speech therapists have like licenses with, and who are one of the like leading voices on where somebody would go to find out, like especially speech therapists, like what is this? And ASHA's definition of what's stuttering has actually changed, but currently they have changed the name of the specialty group from I forget exactly the phrase, but from basically they're changing from fluency disorders to stuttering, cluttering, and fluency disorders. So it's like a half win, but it is a really interesting thought, is if you're calling something a fluency disorder the way that I did, but I know other people have, and the way it has been defined for so long, like how does that make people feel? Like Mike said, the word impediment? Like, how does that make you feel when you say it versus calling it a stutter instead, or stammer if you're in the UK?
Lucy, you had your hand raised. Did you want to share?
Yeah, well, some of what I'm saying is just repeating what everybody else said. Sorry, I just put eye drops in. So I'm not crying, my eyes are tearing. I'm Lucy. I've been associated with NSA, I think about a year now, but I stuttered my whole life. As a kid, and I think still to some impact it does, the word stuttering, besides being what they call it, an onomatopoeia, it sounds like what it is, you know, because stutter, stammer, usually you trip on it. Stuttering had a negative connotation. You know, you think of Porky Pig and, you know, as a kid and the way it was portrayed. So I too kind of went along with what the adults called it. And I grew up through 8th grade at a parochial school. And somehow the nuns conveyed this, well, this is just a matter of willpower. So we're going to make you do the book reports. We're going to make you get up and get laughed at. We're going to make you do this. And once I finally realized that, no, they were wrong, you know, but I convinced myself, you know, and this is perfectly just to accept it myself, that it was like wearing glasses. I needed the glasses, but when I couldn't find my glasses, that's parallel to when I was stuttering. I can't find my words, I can't find my glasses. I can still see, I can still make noise. Once I put the glasses back on, I'm fluent again. Not that I had to have the glasses, but it just seemed like a similar condition. It was an impediment only when it reared its head. So, and that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee?
Hi. Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you. I'm Lee Brown. I'm a speech language pathologist. I work with adolescents. Ezra, it's really nice to see you. I feel like we've had a lot of conversations on Instagram, and it's so cool to actually be face to face on the screen. So this word impediment really is one that has been a sticking point for me for many years as an SLP, whether it relates to stuttering or other aspects of speech. I actually don't use it at all because by definition, my understanding is that it suggests that there is something in the way, right? There's something that is literally creating a barrier. You know, let's say you've got a gumball in your mouth and you're trying to speak, and that's an impediment. It's going to impact your ability to speak. So when, in terms of another aspect of the field, if I'm dealing with, you know, an articulation issue, I would use the term impairment. But I never ever thought to use really impairment or impediment with stuttering therapy. And one of my biggest challenges is working with 6th graders who are coming out of elementary school, and for, you know, the past 5 years or more, they've been kind of trained to use language other than stuttering. You know, a lot of them have been trained to kind of refer to stuttering as bumpy speech. So I feel like I spend sometimes a year or more just hoping to establish some comfort with the word stuttering. I'm also open to my students saying, you know, if they want to call it something else, great. But I just feel like it's so important to reduce the shame, because unfortunately it starts early. And when they come to me, even as 6th graders, it's a huge task to try to undo the negative thinking because it started so early. I have an interesting student who I'm working with now. When I first met him, he was telling me something about his experience, and he said, well, you know, I do that thing. What's it called? And I said, stuttering. And he said, yeah, that's it. And I had read in his background, you know, the reports and so forth from his previous SLP that he struggled with word retrieval issues. So I said, was that a word retrieval issue, or was that shame around saying the word stuttering? And to be honest, to this day, I don't know. But that's one of my biggest concerns, dealing with the vulnerable adolescent population and wanting to really help them build their confidence. And I'm open to them giving me a different word if they want one, but I'm not a big fan of bumpy speech, and I'm not a big fan of stigma associated with the word stuttering. I totally understand if someone doesn't want to use that word because maybe they feel like it's a word that they stutter on, and that just makes it difficult. But it feels like a 4-letter word, and I wish that it weren't. I'm not a person who stutters, but I don't want those who are in my care to feel like saying that word is some kind of an indictment. I'm open to any suggestions or tips on kind of how to build some more positive attitudes around the word stuttering for adolescents, or other words, if there are some others out there that maybe we should be using. But yeah, impediment is not one that I've been able to embrace. Anyway, I could go on. I'll stop.
Let's go to Rebecca, and then I want to answer in too.
Oh dear. I think I'd probably rather hear your answer first, but let me
No,
go.
I want to hear yours. You had your hand. You were
I know.
calmly
Well,
waiting.
so I'm an SLP, and I think I have a lot more to learn by being quiet than speaking. But I
No, we
want
want
to
to hear you
say,
now.
well, I'm probably one of the older people in the group, not quite as venerable as John Gamble, but I'm getting there. And I think the problem is if people are treating you badly about anything about yourself, any way you describe it is not going to be a good way to describe it in the long term, because it's going to get associated with all those bad things that you felt when people have talked to you about about it that way. And I'm here to find out how people could best be helped. I've been interested in a lot of different communication disorders in my time, and it always looks like people start out and they say, oh, we want to help these people, so we have to identify them, so we have to give it a name. And then they give it a name, and then people start associating the name with all the bad things that happen to them with that name. And one of the things I like is thinking about stuttering as a neurodiversity issue, so we can talk about it as a difference. And even the word impediment, talking about something as a speech difficulty. I am not a person who stutters. I can tell you, I've got some speech difficulties, especially as I get older. I have some hearing difficulties. I don't care how we describe them myself, but I have a long time where people have not ridiculed me about any of these things. So that's why I mostly want to hear from you all, but I thought I'd just put in my 2 cents. Thank you.
I want to go back, over to Lee's thing where she said, so from an early age, I avoided stuttering. I avoided speaking. I avoided all kinds just because of the guilt and the shame that it brought me. When I was younger, I stuttered a hell of a lot more than I do now. But the 5th grade is probably when I wish I had someone actually sit me down and tell me the truth about it. Instead of avoiding speaking of it. It's the elephant in the room. Let's do an open discussion, please. But that never happened until I was out of high school. I was at the university. I was in my first year, and I was registering, and I was having to, and so I stopped going to speech, and I was in that 7th grade. I says, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this. Nothing's happening. It's the same situation. They had me reading these books. By the 5th time I read it over, I'm fairly fluent. So they think, oh, it's working. Well, it's not. I'm reading the same thing over and over again. So guess what? I'm going to become fluent, right? So anyhow, fast forward to registering for school, the counselor said, hey, we have a speech clinic here. Are you interested? And I was like, oh, crap. Sure. I wanted to avoid that whole discussion. So I went. And actually, I'm so grateful that I did go, because the lady that was the professor there, and she was the one I was working with, she got me to openly embrace the word stuttering and stutter. So when I was younger, I avoided it too. I avoided the word. So when we're younger, we often think, and on my caseload too, I get teachers asking about, hey, they have word retrieval. No, they're just not used. They're avoiding words because of their stutter itself. That's all. It's not that they're dumb. They're not forgetting things. They're just avoiding those words. So instead of facing it, they're actually, I don't remember, what was that word I'm supposed to say? What, that thing. Well, no, I don't. So now when I'm, especially around that age, 6th grade, let's identify with the word stutter. And then as you age, as you get older, it's going to become much easier. But if you avoid it, and guess what? When you're doing a job interview and they ask you, hey, what's going on? Or maybe they don't, you're not going to be able to use the word because of fear. So let's get rid of that fear at an earlier age, I say. But that's just me. I know a lot of speech therapists I work with that don't use those words, and they don't want to address those because they're not comfortable. And I'm like, do you need me to get on the phone with them? Do you need me to speak to mom and dad? Do you need me in a session? I'll gladly go. But yeah, no, I just think it's avoidance. It's an avoidance. Jim, I see your lit up over there, but I didn't know if you wanted to say something.
Ezra, you had your hand raised. Do you want to jump in before we go to Mandy?
Sure, yeah. I was thinking too with some of the, when Rebecca was talking about any word has the potential to develop a negative connotation and a negative association with it. I was like, yeah, it's really interesting because I think that because kind of like what Andy was saying earlier, when we're using the words that we've just kind of been given our whole life, we're not really thinking about how the words might sound to somebody outside of like our experiences, right? So like I might say, oh, I have a fluency disorder or a speech impediment, because to me, it's going to feel the same whether I say that or say stuttering or something else, or at least I think it's going to feel the same. But when I say it to like someone who doesn't know any, like my experiences and all my emotions, and I tell them I stutter, they're going to think probably something different than if I say, I have a fluency disorder or a speech disability. Like they're going to have their own ideas based on the words. Like I mentioned the word fluency, which I think is a really interesting word, the way it gets used in stuttering therapy in particular, because I mentioned the word to a friend who he's not a speech therapist, he doesn't stutter. He's known me for for almost 20 years, which is wild. And when I said the word, he said, well, doesn't fluency just mean like if you know a language or not? What does that have to do with stuttering? And so just sometimes there's these big differences in how we're talking about things. And I also wanted to add to what Mike said with the avoidance really quick, just throw it in there. I had a speech therapist. I was doing the thing where I pretended like I didn't know a word, and the speech therapist asked me to say the word. And because I apparently was a very ballsy kid in some way, I was like, well, can't I just avoid the sound and say a different word? And what the speech therapist told me that I remember to this day, and I was like 8 or 9, she said, if you avoid this sound, sure, that's an option. But eventually, we know that stuttering is really variable. You're probably going to stutter on other sounds. And then your options are going to become smaller and smaller. And pretty soon you won't have very much to say at all. So it's better to just find your way through the word while stuttering than it is to limit your entire vocabulary. And that scared me, but it also really, I think, helped me too. It did a mix. I don't know if there's a better way to go about that, but that is something that I think kids who stutter need to, and adults need to understand, is that the more we avoid, it also makes it bigger and scarier, right? But yeah, anyway, I'll let Mandy go now. Oh, where'd she go?
You're on mute, Mandy. You're on mute.
Thank you. I was trying to lower my hand. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be
Right.
here. Great to see a lot of familiar faces and people that I look up to. And I'm a person who stutters and a speech pathologist. And what a wild ride that has been, coming in, realizing that my speech therapy from childhood taught me to be a master covert person who stuttered. So they gave me the language of being, yes, you're a person who stutters, but you don't want to be that, right? So focus on fluency. And then that was arbitrary, that when I went on to grad school, that was the focus. The focus is fluency. And so and then until just recently, I found help for myself, because I couldn't live with the shame and the awful feelings. And at 41 years old, I had enough. And like you're saying, Ezra, all the avoiding I was taught to do my whole life caused so much problems. But what's really cool, though, I like to say in our field, I do sense that we are this moment of neurodiversity and appreciating it. And I think it's a beautiful moment, and I'm really hopeful that it's the turning point, that we are saying stuttering. We're not focusing on fluency as much anymore. And so that, I know I'm part of a group of SLPs, Spiro ally of stuttering, and they're very much supportive of holistic, acceptance-based stuttering therapy, stuttering care. And so I know that there's a wave of us out there wanting to advocate for this change, because now we have these beautiful lived experiences, or these beautiful stuttering voices that are sharing their stories. We have a space on a broader scale. We have these amazing people that are writing books and podcasts, and we're getting the voices out there more and more and more. And I think that's helping take away the stigma. And it's people like you on this meet that are doing that work and making a change in our world and our society. And so I know, for me, I've been lit on fire. I've talked to all my SLPs in my district, and I know there's this SLP fragility. I coin it kind of nicely, because I know that there's SLPs out there like, oh my gosh, I feel bad for what I did and what I've done. And I mean, I'm one of them. I'm here to raise my hand, because that's what I was taught to do in grad school, to do the same thing that was done to me. But it's like, okay, give yourself some compassion, forgiveness. You didn't know better. Now we do. Let's go and say stutter. Let's teach our kids to be able to talk about their stutter, to learn about it. I know that was one of the biggest things. I didn't. It was like this thing that was in me that I just wasn't allowed to touch or talk about. Just the elephant. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that is extremely detrimental, and those stories are coming out now. And I really, I don't know, call me very positive person, but I don't know, maybe it's just because I've lived it myself, and I'm on fire to make the change myself in the field. But I know I'm amongst a lot of people that are out there, and I know it's showing in the research that's out there too. So hopeful with all of it that stuttering will prevail, and we're going to say the stutter. We're going to get rid of the F word, right? Make that the 4-letter word, or I guess it's more than 4 letters, but I'm rambling now. I hope I got my point across, because I'm also very nervous to be talking. But anyway, Thank you.
Lee?
Yeah, I just have a question for Mandy. Mandy, thank you for sharing. It sounds like you're in a school district. Is that what you said? I'm curious to know, it sounds like you have peers who are on board. I find that this movement it seems like it's a slow one in the school setting. I feel like I'm the only one. I'm the only speech pathologist in my school district who uses the OASIS instead of the SSI-4. And I am slowly but surely convincing my peers to do so. But I read goals and I literally want to collapse on my office floor because the goals are still quite dated. They're still fluency focused. I've seen some that, in my opinion, were unethical. I'm just concerned that I acknowledge that there is a movement, and I'm so glad that the tide is changing. But I, I'm not sure about other settings, but in my experience, it seems like the public school setting is pretty slow to change, and I'm concerned.
Yeah, understandable. And I certainly hear you, Lee. And I think a lot of that is just when you're working with SLPs that have been in the field for a long time, that change is really hard. They just keep doing what they know. However, hey, I've given them examples of way more appropriate goals, resources, YouTube channels, podcasts, books written by people who stutter, getting that to them in, consumable parts and pieces for them. I send them emails. Just giving them that information on a weekly, bi-weekly kind of basis, just filling them with information that they need. And I've also checked, because I understand with the state requirements of making sure that we have the kind of documentation, but I know our school district, it doesn't say that I have to give the SSI. I'm not given the SSI. We've talked about it. No more SSI.
That's right.
At least how I practice. But yeah, so it doesn't say that. So there are many other tools that we can use to evaluate our students. And it doesn't have to be formal, standardized tests either. There's lots of checklists and student-centered, feedback from them too is very important. So the student feedback, parent feedback, teacher, right? So all these other things, but I would be glad to share my email information with you to help you out.
That would be great. Thank you, Mandy.
Yeah.
For those of us that are not SLPs, what is the OASIS and the SSI? Maybe other people are wondering too, because I don't know what they are.
I'm very sorry. I should have explained.
That's okay.
They are both assessments that can be used to evaluate stuttering. The SSI stands for the Stuttering Severity Instrument. I think it's in its 4th edition, SSI-4. Yeah. And in my opinion, it is an entirely listener-focused assessment. A person who stutters has a speaking portion, and then there's a reading portion. And the SLP is essentially recording moments of stuttering and deriving a score based on how often the student or child stutters. And then there's the score is then described in terms of mild, moderate, severe, etc. And for those of us who are SLPs, I mean, when I was in school, this was really the only assessment, if I remember correctly, that was presented. And in public schools, it's often the only assessment that is available. But again, my biggest concern is that it does not focus on the lived experience of the person who stutters. It is extremely, it's arbitrary. It's a snapshot in time, which all tests are, but there's so much that you can miss. For example, I work with a boy who, if you were to give him the SSI-4, he'd probably come out as a severe stutterer. He is one of the most confident speakers I've known. I told him he should do a TED Talk before he goes to high school. He is amazing. And if I gave him that test, that score would tell me that, oh, I've got to pull this kid out for speech therapy twice a week and bombard him with fluency enhancing and stuttering modification strategies. This kid doesn't need anything from me absolutely nothing. Like he is perfectly fine. Meanwhile, this SSI-4 would overlook someone who maybe outwardly doesn't have a very pronounced stutter, but internally is terrified of the listener reactions and the potential for even one or two stutters, for example. So that person might be covert and therefore try extra hard to avoid any stuttering during that assessment, and might come out in the mild range. And then we'll say, oh, so-and-so's fine, no therapy needed. So it's really concerning because those kinds of students or children slip through the cracks, and then they get to high school and they're terrified to raise their hand and answer a question or share a comment, because the cognitive and the affective components of stuttering are really, really weighing on them. But that test never gave us a chance to really evaluate that because it's so focused on the behavioral aspect of stuttering. The OASIS is essentially, I mean, you could really call it sort of a questionnaire, and it is for the speaker to fill out. It's the clinician really doesn't get involved unless, you know, the student has a question about one of the items on the questionnaire, but it's totally focused on the speaker's experience, and it covers all aspects of stuttering in terms of the behavioral, the affective, and the cognitive. It's much more comprehensive, and it gives us a much more robust understanding of the impact of stuttering on a child's life, if there is an impact. And so I could go on, but yes, I'm a much bigger proponent of that. And I'm sorry, the OASIS stands for the overall assessment of the speaker's experience of stuttering. So I think that should be used much more often than it is, at least I can only speak for my school district, but we tend to rely heavily, on the SSI-4 because we're looking for a number and we're looking for a severity rating that speaks to, again, these moments of stuttering. But the reality is that really tells us nothing. My district does not require that we use the SSI-4, thankfully, so I don't use it. But unfortunately, I find that a lot of my colleagues probably just kind of default to it because that's what we've all known for so long. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Pam. Sorry about that.
It did. Thank you very much.
Really quick before we move on to Lucy, she has her hand raised. I do want to say too, I've been a clinical instructor for Sacramento State, mainly for language 3, so brain, TBI and stuff like that. But I also do it for their fluency disorders section. And I tell grad students right off, you got to get away from the SSI-4. It's just junk. It only measures that moment in time, and that's it, because it's so cyclical in nature. We can have great moments or we could have really good moments, meaning so difficult to speak, right? So, but the other thing too, if we're relying on the OASIS from a person who doesn't want to disclose everything, you might not get a true picture. So I often say, I know that they're in grad school and they have to assess by the 6th week, whatever, but do you need to do an assessment on someone at this stage? Maybe for your practice, but probably more so not. Just give it a listen and you're going to see that they do stutter. So, because if you give the SSI-4, it's kind of junk, and the OASIS, it's more reliable. But if they're that type of person who doesn't want to mark everything down, oh, I'm fine, I don't do that, I don't do this, then you're not getting a true picture anyway. So just give it a listen, and talk, and you'll figure out where they are for the most part anyway. But I do understand when they're really young like that, they sometimes they can't figure those things out in life just yet, which is why they need instructors. So I was just rambling anyway. We're going to you, Lucy. I see your hand up.
Hello again, yes. I always found it interesting, even as a kid, when, I was one of those kids that was pulled out twice a week to a speech therapy class. And they had us all together. I was the only stutterer. And, the kids who couldn't say their R's and kids who couldn't say their S's. But I was the only one that had a label. I stuttered. They just couldn't say their R's, who couldn't say their S's. It seemed different. They had speech impediment. I stuttered. I didn't really process it as to were they prioritizing them according to severity, or but they were just trying to distinguish between the two. I mean, between us all. I didn't find the word stutterer when I would describe it myself, when I used it, derogatory, because to me it was the most basic way to connect with somebody else. And for those that I've been in other group chats with, they know my professional history. I ended up a corporate trainer. I, was an instructor in the Navy. I was in Navy public affairs. I spoke to the press. But in a classroom, I would always identify the elephant in the room. I didn't say I have a speech impediment. I would say I stutter. Yeah, sorry, I would stutter on the word stutter, so because I wanted people to focus on me, not what was happening. And I would break the tension with a joke, saying, I'm not having a meltdown about public speaking. I've not fallen on the way into the room. This is what I do. And then they would relax and they would listen to what I'm saying, not how I'm saying it. But that doesn't always work. It depends on the severity of the speech. So I've not had negative experiences with the word stutter. I actually have a T-shirt that says, that promotes the cause of stuttering awareness. And I'm surprised that the parents that have approached me when I've had it on it and forgot I had the shirt on. And they'll come up and they'll start talking to me about it. And I'll say, wait a minute, I didn't say anything to you. How do you know I started? On the T-shirt, I'm broadcasting it, so. But then again, I think it depends on, I was severe as a kid. I was severe until my middle 20s when I went through a good program. But when you talk about those tests, the SSSI and the OASIS, I went through a program at Hollins College under Dr. Ronald Webster. I'm not sure if any of the SLPs are familiar with him.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, it was all biofeedback, and it was a good program, but they never dealt with the psychological side of it, the OASIS side of it. So I met my husband like the first week I had gone back to school after I came back from Hollins. So my speech was fine. So as I gradually relaxed a bit and stopped thinking about so much, and the stuttering started to come through a bit, he got a little impatient when we were dating. He said, where's this coming from? Well, so it took him a while to adjust to the fact that, no, this is me, but he got to the point that he didn't even hear it anymore. So he was always surprised when people would say, oh, your wife stutters? And he said, she does? Oh, yeah, she does. So.
And I actually have my speech therapy from when I was 8 years old. This is in 1999, and they did the SSI for me. I'm going to read what it says for a reason. So it says this is under fluency. I also had articulation issues. I couldn't pronounce my R's, but for fluency. The Stuttering Severity Instrument, SSI, revealed a moderate impairment of fluency at sentence and conversational levels. There is evidence of breathing discoordination for speech purposes, i.e. tonic blocks, word prolongations, interjection of ums, and part word repetitions occur 80% of the time in spontaneous sentences. There's a couple of things there that I want to point out. One of them is that apparently, if I'm reading this right, 80% of words had a stutter, and yet it was moderate rating, which is just kind of surprising to me. But also what really stands out to me is this information doesn't tell you if I needed speech therapy or not. Because I could have been doing all of that and been totally okay with that and been like, yeah, I stutter 80% of the time or whatever, but like, it hasn't slowed me down, right? I'm still participating in class. I'm still having spontaneous conversations. I'm not afraid of everything. Or I'm stuttering 80% of the time and I'm regressing into myself. I'm developing a lot of anxiety. I'm not making friends. It doesn't tell you anything besides how much somebody is noticeably to the listener stuttering. And so that's part of why it's helpful to be reframing and re-seeing a lot of this stuff, is because a lot of times we use words, we use phrases we don't think have a lot of meaning behind it, or we think it means something to us, but that doesn't translate over to somebody else, right? Like I'm sure the speech therapist read this and thought, this person obviously needs speech therapy, but I read this now and I don't think that. I think, well, I don't know, I don't have enough information.
I'm glad I had speech therapy, not so much, the stuff as a kid, because they really didn't know what to do with stuttering. But as I got older, and I had a similar experience, when I first went away to college, I said, oh, do you want to try this therapy we have? Yeah, sure, I'll try. But as an adult, and I would say from college on, not so much high school, because high school is more, I don't know, it's more predatory than college socially, as you're all coming into your own and the cliques. My stuttering never really shut me up. I was always talkative, and but it's the one advantage I saw to not getting like really stuttering therapy that clicked with me was that, and people have heard me say this, I became a walking thesaurus, and that helped me. As I was a journalism major, I was a writer. I was a writer in the Navy. So maybe I'm being Pollyannish and trying to find the best, in the worst. But yeah, but when it comes to that SSI and just dealing with what, your speech, it's like, you can't build a house with one tool. I'm sure it's a good tool to evaluate where you are and then where you, progress. And so somebody said something about in this group that they were worried about their son might be a stutterer. And when he was 39, he realized, no, he's going to be okay. I know of a woman who was in an auto accident. She's a professional, and she's in one of the groups. And as a result, she's, cognitively, she's 100%, except she developed a horrible, horrible stutter. So here she is as a professional, successful adult, and now she got a stutter that was as bad as I had when I was a kid. It's like, yeah, it can happen to people, but then there's like something organic you can point to. So anyways, I'm starting to ramble. Okay.
One of the things I want to bring up, because I know we're it's now 6:30 or so. What about the word disability? Would anyone identify it as a disability, or do we think of it as not a disability? Anyone want to go down that road with us?
But before we go down that road, I do want to point out really quick that when we use, from my experience, and somebody can disagree with me, this is fine. When we use the word disability, it's not about how we feel, right? It's about something that's more external from ourselves. So I just want to point that I think a lot of times when people ask, how do you feel about the word disability, or do you consider your stutter a disability? A lot of times people will say, well, I don't feel like it is. And I want us to see if we can find different ways to approach it than the way that if you feel like it is or not.
I think for some it can be a disability. Again, we're all on a spectrum with this as to how severe it is. And like when my stuttering was very severe, no, I would not apply for a job as a police dispatcher because I had a disability. It was like I saw myself as I'm the same as a person that can't hear well. Well, if you can't hear the call or you can't repeat the call, you're not qualified for it. But, and I used to laugh with friends because I was so nervous about job interviews that, hey, I should make the case, they can check 2 boxes. They get a highly qualified female and they get an ADA check, which is bad humor, but I used to say that sometimes. Yes, saying it's a disability is, there are some things, some areas where, yes, it is, I feel, a disability because you won't be able to do your job.
Arnetta?
Okay, let's see here. Okay, when we're speaking on what we call stuttering, and I know, if I recall, stuttering comes under the ADA Act. So but I looked at that as a form of discrimination because it wasn't just because you stutter and you got denied a job, which I've had that, but this was before ADA, and I look back on that and thinking, I could have sued them, but coming here, when I'm hearing these words, speech impediment, disability, that one just came up, is just reminding me of before the NSA, and I just have to give a high five, a shout out to the NSA, because some of these words, yeah, they may have been used in the past, and but I just feel that in 2024, we are too empowered to be calling it anything else but stuttering, and I think in the past when people may have said speech impediment or, but I use the word non-fluency, just because, that's how, there's fluent and there's non-fluency, but I don't see, I feel like some words in the past were chosen just because you were choosing words that you may be able to say, not so much if that was your intention of a description, but, knowing I could probably not say stuttering, I would probably think, well, possibly a speech impediment or something. But now I just feel, and to me the word disability is just so old school. It just sounds like you're walking around with a crutch or a cane or something. That's what it sounds like. And with the NSA, it's such and empowering, and you should be, it's just, I just feel like we have come too far to go back to some of these old words, and a big thing about stuttering is word avoidance for me. And when you talk about covertness, that's nothing but word avoidance. And I know there's that whole idea of work success, and you want to move up in your employment, and so you have to do what you can. And stuttering has that face of oh, something must be wrong with them, they may be a little slow or something. But there are many, when I look at the many people who stutter who are successful, just successful in their own space. I'm not saying successful income wise, but it's just we need to feel positive, because that's where, you know, fluency or that comfort for me comes from, you know. So just wanted to share that. Oh, and I do want to add though that I come from a family of people who stutter, and it's really interesting to listen to the speech therapist talk, because my 6-year-old grandson is definitely you know, I shouldn't say that, but he's a stutterer, although his mom is a stutterer also. So, you know, it's this has been an interesting conversation, but my daughter is very stuttering suave, and she's someone who definitely self identifies and puts it out there right then and there that she is a person that stutters. And she's was even, you know, I didn't feel that way, but she doesn't have any problem at all with her son stuttering now. You know, it's no big deal to her. So, you know, I'm kind of really glad that that's, you know, where she is. So it's a good thing, I guess. But me, I'm still kind of cringe. Oh my God. But, you know, as I say, in 2024, possibly in this, you know, realm, things aren't as bad as they once were. So anyway, thank you.
So I brought up the word disability because some people will say I have a speech disability, but it doesn't really identify with a stuttering. It can mean all kinds of different things too, right? And as well, there's others that'll say I have a speech disorder. It's like, okay, you know, I could get on board with that one too. Personally, you know, I have a difference. I speak differently. That's all. That's all I do. But I will tell you this: I advocate, because it does fall under the ADA, and I advocate for students or even young adults. Hey, if you're going to go to college, go to the Students with Disabilities Center, register your disability, if you will, because guess what? For the rest of your college life, you will get priority enrollment, never be waitlisted ever again. Even if you don't do anything else with it, that is gold right there. So I'm all for that one, because it's very true, right? Sometimes we're in schools, we're in universities for 5 years because I need the one class that I can't get it. Well, not anymore. Not if you have a disability. You could register it and you're golden. But I just don't know if the word disability or even disorder is appropriate these days. I don't really like the words myself. And I know that lit a fire under Ezra, so I'm going to Ezra.
I'll say I don't like the word disorder, but I do like the word disability. And so I really like some of the advocacy stuff. So I'm gonna try to explain it pretty briefly because I know we don't have a ton of time. But the reason I like disability is because the word, for one, like what Mike said, it offers this protection that we have. Like that was one of the things my mom said a lot to me growing up, is she said, you don't let, and kind of what that I was saying too, of the like, people don't get to discriminate against you. Like this is protected under law, and they will try to, right? But you have something in your agency. And I think that I like the word disability because we're going to be like, culture is currently changing. And in some ways there's good, but there's also this heavier reliance on computers, on AI. And I don't know how many of you people out there like me have tried to call like Amazon customer service, and you get stuck in a phone tree and you press 0 and you press 0, but they don't do it anymore. You're just stuck on the phone tree. And that is an issue. That is creating a disability situation because there's multiple ways to see disability. There's the old school medical model where it's like disability means that my stutter makes me broken or less than, but there's other models too, and one of the popular ones is the social model. So a traditional sense of this would be if someone's in a wheelchair, the medical model, you look at them and you go, well, the disability is you because you can't use your legs. But the social model looks at it and says, the disability is in the accessibility. You're disabled because there's not a ramp here. Like that's why you're disabled. It's not about your legs, it's about the accessibility. So for people who stutter, I actually think this word is going to become more important because when you're doing something like this, like let's say it's not Amazon, let's say it's your doctor's office and you need medical care, but you can't get past a phone tree. That is a serious accessibility issue, and that is creating a disability by itself, right? And so the difference with that is because, you know, you look at like what creates an ability, there's multiple things, right? It's not always about what I can or can't do. Like I can talk if someone waits for me, if the situation can understand and recognize stuttering. But if there is an accessibility barrier, then all of a sudden I no longer can. But that's not my fault. That's a fault of the situation. When you're using the word disorder, it doesn't have that. Like you don't look at something as like, okay, well, this person is ordered or not ordered, or what they can do is not ordered or disordered. It's a little more innate about the person, whereas this ability provides other ways of seeing the situation. So even though I'll usually refer to my stutter as a stutter, I do find umbrella terms to be helpful in situations like that when you're trying to group things, because I think people with other speech disabilities have a lot in common with us. And a lot of times, kind of what I think Lucy was sharing earlier, there's this tendency to separate us out. But I actually think we can have so much more power together with this kind of a thing. So that's why I actually kind of like some of the umbrella terms, if they're ones that you can take the language and apply it in a way that, like, I think Leo was saying earlier, is empowering, as opposed to, or no, I think someone else was saying it earlier, the word empowering. If you can make it if you can reclaim it as empowering, I think it can actually be really helpful. So that's always my pitch. And I know you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to use the word for yourself, but that's why I actually find a lot of empowerment in the word disability, because it doesn't have to be about me. It can be about the situation, or if someone's discriminating against me, they're discriminating me because of a disability, I can ask for accommodation. So earlier, when I think Lucy said can't be a dispatcher, possibly, but what are other jobs? Because people who stutter will sometimes see that job say, we require good communication, and they'll think, well, I don't qualify. But you can ask for a reasonable accommodation, right? Like, is this a situation where like there's no possibility? Like, you look at someone like Stephen Hawking, who definitely had a speech difference and things going on, but you wouldn't look and say, oh, that guy was a terrible communicator, right? Like he had accommodations, he had things that made it so that he had the ability to show us like, oh, actually he's a really good communicator. So I like to keep those things in mind.
So before we begin to wind down and wrap up, I did notice there was another question in the chat that we haven't gotten to yet. Jim asked, at what age is disclosing a good practice? And I'd be curious, you know, both what people who stutter and SLPs think about that. And maybe it's kind of good that we did wait towards the end of this to like look at that question. Andy.
Hi, thanks. So the question was, at what age is a good time to disclose? Yeah, I don't actually look at it as an age thing. I look at it as there's a couple of variables that come to mind first for me. It's severity of stutter, which isn't a bad thing. It just is. And also, was it severity and job type or situation. I don't necessarily think about it as once you reach a certain age, you should be more comfortable or self-disclosing more. I feel like everybody kind of has their own path with that, and everybody's situation is different. So it's from my perspective, it's a more complicated situation, and it's more of a case-by-case situation that the person who stutters really needs to think about for themselves. What best serves them, as opposed to what others think that they should do. Thanks.
I think you had your hand up, Mandy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly echo Andy. I think it is an individual choice, but I think what's helpful though is that it can be offered to kids. And I know that the Arthur M. Blank Center out of University of Texas, they have clips of little kiddos, maybe as young as, I don't know, 5 or 6, doing this, talking about their stutter, educating others. I know it's part of their care model, which is part of the advocacy. I know for me personally, I wish I would have had a speech pathologist talk about how to do that, because I would always, oh, I'm sorry, I stutter. It was always an apologetic self-disclosure. So I was just, that loop, that consistent or that perpetual, shame. But so I think there is a place for it in therapy for young kiddos, and offering, certainly if they're not comfortable with doing it, we don't want to force it. But I think it just helps with that whole stigma, right? It's, yep, I stutter, just like maybe I'm someone who has diabetes. Yep, I'm diabetic. I can tell people that I have to, take my sugar. I mean, I know Nan Ratner spoke at an NSA last summer about this. Like, we need to be working with our children who stutter earlier on, just like how children with, childhood conditions, medical conditions are cared for in the sense of how they know about it, how they advocate, and that's how we should also be offering those kind of things to our kiddos who stutter. And I think self-disclosure is our disclosing statements are one of those things that empower our kiddos, but certainly want to honor and respect everyone's comfort with it. But at least it's offered, right? We hold space for that. It's holding space, allowing that opportunity, giving the kid options. They get to write it. Actually, I have a student, I know he's not 6 years old, but just an example. I've done it with, 8th graders to high schoolers, and it's just really cool. Like, they come up with how they want to say it. So I think that's a very important part of it is, making sure that they are using words they want to use too. So
I think disclosure comes with comfortability and being comfortable disclosing, and that also comes with acceptance, right? Acceptance and comfortability. Am I comfortable enough disclosing the fact that I stutter? As a grown adult of these days, absolutely I do. I do every time I give lectures, every time I give presentations. I just say really quick, hey, the blah, 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 whatever, I disclose it and it's fine. But if you're not comfortable, then maybe the acceptance isn't there. I don't want to ramble on. We're going to go to Lee because she has her hand up, and as well as some others.
Yeah, just really quick. I think that it can just vary so much from person to person or child to child. I do agree that we shouldn't force disclosure upon children. I think that we should also present children with some creative options in terms of how you disclose. So it doesn't have to always be the traditional, hey, by the way, I stutter. I'm a huge proponent that it should not be apologetic. And unfortunately, I think, Mandy, your experience is far too common where there's this kind of assumption that you would have to apologize. So I think that's really important to make sure children especially understand that at an early age, that there's no apologies needed. But maybe disclosure comes in a different form for some kids. Maybe it comes in the form of wearing a t-shirt from the NSA or from some other organization that is a supportive organization for people who stutter. I think it's also important to model what disclosure can look like. And that might be as simple as maybe showing some videos in the therapy room of, kids online who are having discussions about stuttering openly, just so that you are, as someone mentioned in a previous discussion that I was in about stuttering, bringing stuttered voices into the therapy room so that the child sees that they're not alone, right? There are other young people in the world who are trying this out and having success with it. So I think the exposure is important. I think the understanding that every child is different and some may be ready at some times and others are not, and that what disclosure is going to look like for each child is also possibly going to be different, and that's okay. It might even come in the form of a written disclosure. Really quick example, a student was telling me during the beginning of the school year, there was a getting to know you activity and students were sharing kind of facts about me on a piece of paper, and he chose to disclose that he's a person who stutters, and that paper was only seen by his teacher. That was a great form of disclosure and he was comfortable with that. So again, I think creative options is key here.
Mary Tesh, you had your hand raised.
I'm an SLP too, and I totally agree with the statements that have been shared so far. I think that it's definitely a personal choice, and I love the way that Mandy was phrasing it as, offering versus like, hey, this is what you're going to do type of thing, of course. I love working with kids who stutter. I also work in the schools, and I really share in the sentiment that Lee and Mandy have shared about kind of helping turn the tide as far as encouraging other SLPs to take more acceptance-based approach to therapy. And really, I've seen a lot of kids really take hold of the idea. Like when I put it out there as an offer or an idea for self-disclosure, I've seen kids really excited about the idea of doing a classroom presentation about stuttering. And afterwards, they've been like, I'm so glad that people just know now. So I don't have to wonder, who in this room knows that I stutter, who doesn't. It's more like, it's just out there in the open. And so now they can focus on like the content of what they want to say, and they can listen more to what their teacher's saying instead of being up in their head about, who here knows I stutter, who doesn't, or listen to their friend at lunch, just be a more present listener instead of being caught up in their head about worries about stuttering. And yeah, I'd say that's true for like 4-year-olds through teenagers who stutter, who I've worked with. Like I've seen it as a very relevant thing that all those ages have shown interest in different ways. Sometimes the teenagers, they might be more hesitant for understandable reasons. And like, for instance, I have a teenager who, isn't ready to self-disclose to certain people yet, but she does want her whole school to change their mindset as far as some of the misconceptions about stuttering. And so she, along with some of her peers in her stuttering group, have created like little stuttering facts poster that we're going to post in the hallways, like 8.5 by 11, just so we can kind of help dispel some of the misconceptions so that she can feel more comfortable if she does have a moment where she really has to say something in class and some stuttering comes out, that people know. Some people might have read the things that we put on the poster, like, hey, stuttering is not caused by being nervous or lack of intelligence or whatever. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts and my experiences.
Thank,
Oh, thank you.
thank you. We'll hear from Lucy and then turn it back over to Mike and Ezra as a wrap up.
Hello again. I am not an SLP, but as a child who stuttered, because I stuttered as long as I can remember, my family confirms that. I don't think it would have done me much good to talk to me about, coming out with it and disclosing it. Because I don't think I would go grasp the idea. Because when I finally did reach that point, in my mind, we're talking about ownership. We're telling the world I am a sum of my parts. You don't get to define me by, the length of my forearm or, the color of my hair, just like you don't get to define me just by my speech. So I think that takes a level of maturity and real self-awareness. I definitely think that guiding somebody towards that, starting as young as you can, is imperative. Because some people stutter, get better as they get older, and some of us never do get better. So prepare us for the world, and thank you to all the SLPs out there. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ezra, Mike, you want to wrap us up?
Thank you everyone for all your contributions and insights. It's such a fun and challenging and I don't know, there's a lot of emotions that can come up when we're talking about the way that we talk and the language we use, and words, as we know, are so personal. I think someone said in the chat earlier, words are so powerful and they carry so much weight. And I really am hopeful that we do see and we're experiencing changes of the way that we talk about our own stuttering experience, in part because of the way that it impacts us, but also in part of the way it impacts other people and a societal shift that we see. I feel like I hear people say, people still make fun of stuttering, but they don't make fun of other things. But then that person still uses a lot of language that I think can add to that negative stigma as well. And just trying to wade through that. I really appreciate everyone who was vulnerable and shared about that.
I do appreciate this NSA Connects. It was kind of something where Pam and Ezra and I the other day we were like, hey, we need to come up with talking points, and honestly, our list was a lot longer than we got around to, because there's so many things we could all talk about and share. I do appreciate everyone for joining and being a part of this. You never know, we might see one again in the future.
Thank you, Ezra and Mike, for co-hosting this, and thank you all for just as Ezra said, for these wonderful contributions. Thank you. Hope to see some of you at the NSA conference in July.
And thank you, Pam, for putting this together and making it happen.